Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Digital Bootcamp Session 3, I believe we are on. Couple quick announcements. This will take less than a minute because we are on a clock. We're not doing live anymore. Your feedback on our Instagram poll last week told us that you would prefer recorded. So we heard that. I mean, also, it's great for us because the quality of the video is much better when we don't do it live. And then we're obviously going to continue to archive it on Instagram TV, but we are going to be archiving it on our website. So you can go to lhcstuman.com, click on media, or just /media, and everything will be there. So some of you guys have told me that your parents don't allow you on YouTube, Instagram, whatever. That's fine. Like, you don't need any of those platforms to access what we're doing. So another reminder. We want to encourage you to take 8 weeks worth of notes for Digital Bootcamp, and the due date that you need to show that to us will be December 1st. Obviously, you can't show it to us yet because we haven't gotten through those 8 weeks. Real quick, by way of review, last week we talked about creation and the central figure being Adam, the time period being creation, and the location was Eden. Here's a summary statement. We're going to start doing summary statements for each one. Didn't do this last week, so go add this or just add this into your notes for this week. Adam is created by God, but he sins and destroys God's original plan for man. And so, as a result of that, God goes on this, and the Bible takes us on this incredible arc, this incredible conquest for redemption. So, creation. Now we're going to move to the patriarch period. So here we go, all new, fresh content, patriarch period. Central figure is Abraham. Father Abraham had many sons, right? You maybe know the song all the way back from preschool. The period is the patriarch period, and the location is the land of Canaan. Back then it was called Canaan. Now it's called Israel. We're going to look at 4 major men: grandfather, right? Great-grandfather, grandfather, father, son, or however you want to break it up. They're all related, okay? So we're going to look at each one of them. The first one is Abraham. And he is the father of the Hebrew people. And so the central kind of scripture verse, I'm not sure if you're able to see this on the screen, Genesis 12, 2 through 3. So if you remember last week, I said in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, we see the first promise of Jesus in all of creation. Well, in Genesis chapter 12, God promised Abraham that he'll make him into a great nation, and he'll bless him, make him famous, and he will be a blessing to others. And furthermore, he will bless those who bless Abraham and curse those who cursed Abraham. All the families on the earth will be blessed through Abraham. So God gives this major promise to Abraham. Conundrum? Abraham has no kids. All right? And so kind of through some miraculous stuff and a crazy story, when Abraham's 100 and his wife is 90, they have their first son. His name is Isaac. And so Isaac carries on and continues on in the promise here. He is the second father of the promise. Isaac has 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. Esau is actually older. They're twins, older by minutes. Esau literally means in Hebrew red and hairy. All right, and so Esau is a red and a hairy dude. And Jacob came out grasping the heel of his brother Esau. And so Jacob's name literally means heel grasper, or kind of a colloquialism or a slang, I guess, term for deceiver, conniver, right? And so Jacob, his son, literally lives up to that name, in fact, tricking Esau out of his blessing and out of his birthright from his father Isaac. And so the promise of Abraham back in Genesis 12 carries on through Isaac and then through Jacob. And so Jacob is the father of the nation of Israel. So though Abraham is the father of the Hebrew people, Jacob is literally the father of the nation of Israel, because Jacob has 12 sons. And you may have heard of the 12 tribes of Israel. If not, look them up, and we'll that'll continue to be a theme. Jacob's 12 sons literally become the promised 12 tribes of Israel. So Benjamin and Dan and Gad and Asher and all these other ones that are out there, Jacob's sons they break up into those different 12 tribes. And so we'll get to those a little bit later, even today. One of Jacob's sons is Joseph. Joseph was the favorite. Jacob gave Joseph a coat of many colors. He showed him favoritism. Joseph was also a little bit of a punk early on in his life. And so out of revenge, his brother sold him into slavery, right? How many of you wish you could sell your brother or sister into slavery? But they sold Joseph into slavery. He went down to Egypt. He grew like people looked to him and thought that he was just an incredible role model and person to look up to. And so Potiphar's wife took interest in him, and Joseph fled temptation, fled away from Potiphar's wife. Unfortunately, that got him put in prison for years and years. Finally, interprets a dream, ends up outside of prison, and ends up second in command in all of Egypt during a very, very tough time, land of famine. A famine was going on in the land. What happens is his brothers who sold him into slavery come down and ask Egypt, who has all these resources, because a guy named Joseph had the wisdom to look ahead and interpret the dream that, man, we're going to need to stockpile some stuff. So his brothers come and ask him and say, hey, can we have some of your food? Otherwise, our family is going to cease to exist. Remember, God promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. Well, now that nation's about to cease to exist because they have no grain, no harvest, and Joseph is there. And after some trickery and stuff with his brothers, he gives it to him. And then he moves the whole nation down to Egypt. And that's kind of where we end now. So real quick, here's the summary statement. Abraham is chosen by God to father a people to represent God to the world. All right, so God chooses Israel as his chosen race, the Hebrew people. And so we move from patriarch to the Exodus. Now, that's how they ended up in Egypt, right? When the brothers came to Joseph, the family moved there. As they moved there, they began to multiply. And this multiplication of the Hebrew people and the Israelite people freaks Pharaoh out. And so our central figure in the Exodus time period is Moses, and the location is Egypt. That's how they got into Egypt. Well, God promised Abraham land, nation, leader. So they need to get back to that promised land, that land of Canaan, or Israel, which now we know as. They need to get back to it. So the first thing we see in the Exodus time period is the freedom from slavery in Egypt. And the way that Moses and God goes about that, I guess, through Moses, is these 10 plagues. Turn the water to blood, frogs, gnats, flies, death of livestock, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, ultimately death of the firstborn. You know that death of the firstborn of the Pharaoh's son is what ultimately gets Pharaoh to agree and convinces him to let God's people go. So they head out, come to the Red Sea. God miraculously parts the waters. All of the Israelite people walk across on dry land. As they get across, and Pharaoh's army is now chasing them because Pharaoh changed his mind again. Waters come back in and take care of Pharaoh's army in that way. So after that is the law period. So God gives the commandments to Moses at Mount Sinai. And so these are the 10 commandments, the very first tablet in the history of the world. But there were 2 stone tablets where God etched in the laws, the 10 commandments. You can find that in Exodus 19 through 40. And then they head to Kadesh Barnea. Kadesh Barnea is right outside of Canaan, right outside of the Promised Land. And God and Moses send in 12 spies to go check out the land of Canaan. Now, 12 spies, right? 12 tribes of Israel, so one from each tribe, one of each of the brothers, the descendants, right? The 12 tribes. They go in, 10 say yes, 2 say no. 10 say no, 2 say yes. So the majority says no. 2 faithful are reminded that God promised that he will deliver them into the land of Canaan, into the promised land. So those 2 people are Joshua and a guy named Caleb. Those 2 are the ones that remember. The people go with the 10. They don't go with the 2. And so because they go with the 10, they unfortunately have to endure 40 years of wandering. So God says anyone 21 and older will not inherit the promised land. So they have to wait 40 years for that generation to die off. And that's the consequence for them not believing, and the consequence for them rebelling against God and not taking the promised land when God is literally going to gift it to them, but they're freaked out because of what they see and the giants in the land and all this kind of stuff. And so here's our summary sentence, our summary statement for this time period. Through Moses, God delivers the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt and then gives them the law. So again, back to Genesis 12. Remember, God gave this promise to Abraham, and look at how he is faithful to carry it out. God is, through Moses, taking the people out of captivity in Egypt and bringing them back to the promised land. God, through his providence, brought them to Egypt through Joseph, even though it was a terrible thing selling his brothers selling him into slavery. God kept his hand of protection on those people. And then, when it was time to get them out, God got them out supernaturally through Moses and the 10 plagues and parting of water and just all this crazy stuff. Like, God is totally in control and totally taking care of these people. You can see all the way back Genesis 3. Genesis 12, God is faithful to his promise. So, we have creation, the patriarch period, the Exodus, and now we're going to move on into the conquest, all right? The conquest is where we are now. Our central figure for that is Joshua. Time period, obviously, is the conquest, and the location is back in Canaan. So Abraham was in Canaan, they moved down to Egypt, and they moved back in to Canaan. So, real quick, what happens is another miraculous parting of water. You may not be as familiar with this kind of account in Scripture, but read the first 5 chapters in Joshua, and God miraculously parts the water. He commands the priests to go first, and then the people to follow, and he parts the Jordan River. And so the Jordan River is kind of this natural geographical barrier between not the Promised Land and the Promised Land. So they're outside the Promised Land. Moses has died. All the other people in Israel had died that didn't get to inherit it because of their disobedience back at Kadesh Barnea. But God parts the waters. They walk on through. And then there's this big city, this big deal, Jericho. All right? And Joshua is this army general, and he knows how to defeat armies. In fact, his war tactics are still studied today in war schools. And so there's this miraculous, this amazing war general. He has to figure out how to defeat this city of Jericho that's kind of standing in between them and the Promised Land. And you know what God tells him? He says, hey, walk around the city for 7 straight days. Just take a lap around the city. 1 every day. And on the 7th day, walk around it 7 times. And then when you're done, everyone let out a big shout. And when they do that, the walls come crashing down. Again, God miraculously having his hand and favor on the people of Israel. They continue on in their conquest as over time they defeat other entities within Canaan. So there was not one kind of central government system in the land of Canaan or modern day Israel, just different people groups. And so they would conquer one and conquer another and conquer another. God was just gifting and giving over the land to the people of Israel. Again, remember, God promised this land to them. And even though other people had gotten in their way, God was continuing to show favor and give them that. And then finally, in the kind of back half of the book of Joshua, after they've conquered all the people who are in opposition to it, they take sections of the land of Israel, or the land of Canaan. And so the 12 tribes are broken up into 12 different sections of Israel. So you can actually read where this brother's descendants, they're responsible for having dominion over this section of the land, and then this section, this section, this section. Those 12 tribes will play a role all the way through the Old Testament. Ultimately, one of the tribes, the tribe of Judah, is where we eventually will get the descendant of David, who we all affectionately know to be named Jesus. And so here is our kind of summary statement for the conquest period. Joshua leads the conquest of the promised land. So we have creation, patriarch, Exodus, conquest. Next week we'll take a look at Judges, and we'll take a look at the kingdom, we'll take a look at the exile. So we're going to go all the way from like Samson all the way over to guys like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But this gets us through the first 6 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua of the Bible. So again, don't forget, if you're not caught up, if you're just jumping in here on session 3, jump back to session 1 and take those notes. Remember, 8 weeks of notes. Show it to us at the end by December 1st, and there is a prize, a reward, a graduation gift for all of you who sat under the teaching of Digital Boot Camp. Thank you so much for being here with us this week. Join us next week on Wednesday as we look at session 4.